honourable members that this is the Honourable Shayne Mallard's inaugural speech, and I would ask you to extend to him all of the traditional courtesies. And before he commences, I have, and I apologise if I've missed any, seen at least two former members in the gallery. Firstly, in the upper gallery, the former member for Davidson, Andrew Humphison, welcome. And in the lower gallery, formerly from the Commonwealth Parliament, Senator Chris Puplik. Welcome, Chris. And someone's pointing there, but I'm sorry, I can't actually see who they're pointing at.
John Ryan.
Oh, have you shaved? Oh no, there's the moustache. Our dear friend and former colleague, the Honourable John Ryan, is here. And of course, Madam Speaker, welcome to the Legislative Council for a occasion other than a joint sitting, which is unusual, but wonderful to see you too. The Honourable Shayne Mallard.
Yeah. Mr. President, it's a great honour and a privilege to stand here in this historic chamber and deliver my inaugural speech in reply to the Governor's address outlining the agenda of the re-elected Baird government in this chamber last week. I'm honoured to be in the presence of my parliamentary colleagues from both chambers and various political persuasions, so many friends and family, Liberal Party members and supporters. And I stand here today acknowledging that I stand on the shoulders of so many of the people, either present today or here in spirit, or indeed reading this Hansard or watching the speech via the internet, as I know some are, or on their iPhones and iPads. Welcome to you all. I thank you all sincerely for your part in my journey to date. I also stand here, Mr. President, knowing that 239 years ago, when my great-grandfather of 7 generations removed, Private Thomas Lucas, came ashore on the First Fleet as a Marine on the convict transport ship HMS Scarborough, that his arrival and the arrival of the fleet augured massive change and indeed, in many respects, tragedy for the Aboriginal people of Australia, which we are still coming to terms with today. And so, Mr. President, as a direct descendant of the First Fleet, and with great humility and dignity, I acknowledge that I speak here today on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present. Private Thomas Lucas had no concept of invasion. When he disembarked, probably thankful to God that they had survived the perilous journey, and nor did his wife or his future wife, my distant grandmother, Anne Howard, a convict on the Second Fleet. Indeed, as we know, Australia was to be colonised under the legal fiction of terra nullius, decreed by Whitehall and invoked by Cook in 1770, and overturned by our High Court in 1992. That decision, the Mabo decision, was to me a fundamental awakening as a non-lawyer of the majesty, the breadth and the reach of the rule of law, to the centrality of good government. It confirmed in my mind the strengths of our civil society and its underlying liberal democratic traditions as the natural form of government for humanity in the never-ending journey of government. Mr. President, I dedicate whatever good endeavours I can whilst in this chamber to advancing the reconciliation process with our First People, including the long overdue recognition as First Australians in our Constitution. And I'm sure there are other honourable members present from all sides of the chamber who are doing the same. Mr. President, I'd like to echo the words of our good friend, Senator the Honourable Marise Payne, in her inaugural speech in the Senate. She said, "It is with mixed senses of both responsibility and honour, and not insignificantly feelings of relief, that I finally stand here today." Indeed, I too am relieved to be finally standing here today, and I think many others are relieved too. My journey to this place has taken its time. I never was a hare, I always was a tortoise. Along the way, I have immersed myself in various aspects of public service, whether that is through local government, where I served 12 years on the councils of South Sydney and City of Sydney councils, or through policy work in both private sector and in government, and on the board of organisations like the Centennial Park and Moore Park Trusts. And equally as important in my journey is the things I've learnt through numerous small businesses in horticulture, hospitality and catering. And every step of the way, with the love and support from family and friends, this journey has been immensely satisfying and fulfilling. Mr. President, the First Fleet may be in my DNA, but complementing that English heritage are grandparents of Scottish and Danish immigration. And this has perhaps given me a sound, small L liberalism sensible approach to life and government. But I'm pleased to report to the Chamber a dash of Irish blood in my father's Tasmanian side of the family, who occasionally stir, some will note, the radical within. And no doubt that partly accounts for my Republican beliefs. Thank you. Although intellectually, a true Liberal Democrat cannot possibly support a hereditary role, no matter how well it has served us to date in a liberal democratic nation's constitution. So that will explain a lot now and in the future to many in the chamber today. And for my new honourable colleagues, you'll no doubt see occasional stirrings of the radical blood in the years ahead. And as for the Australian Republic, just as surely as South Sydney won the grand final finally, the Republic's day will come, rest assured. And on that note, I just want to acknowledge and welcome my fellow Republican and South Sydney supporter, good friend and former Labor Mayor of South Sydney, Tony Pooley, to the chamber today. Ancestry alone certainly does not account for who you are and what you believe in. I was born on my mother's 17th birthday. Mum was just a young girl, really, and my father was 19, really just a lad. And they all said that marriage wouldn't last. Well, my parents, Max and Margie, are still together, stronger than ever, after over 50 years of marriage. Yeah. And I proudly, very proudly, welcome them here today. I spent my early years in public housing in Doomore Street, Penrith, the oldest of 4 kids. Yes, a houso started my life. And back in the 1960s and 70s, the Housing Commission was not considered as a permanent solution to your housing needs. The cheap rents were a hand up, a way to get on your feet and move into your own home and make your way for others to take up the same opportunities. And through the hard work of my parents and the support from my extended family, including Auntie Pat Thompson and our late family matriarch, Nana Gladys Peterson, who I know would be here very proud and is here in spirit with us today, our family managed to become homeowners, eventually living in Kingswood. Along the way, we spent some years on a dairy farm at Castlereagh. Please note that, National Party colleagues. And I attended the local Country 1 teacher school. And most of my family, including my parents, now live in Dubbo, home of the Deputy Premier, asserting further my connections for the National Party. The sparkling new, at the time, Cambridge Park High School had just opened in the late 1970s with wonderful, incredibly wonderful dedicated teachers who took me through the school and eventually to a degree in Australian history and politics at Macquarie University, where, Mr. President, I crossed paths with one of your predecessors, President Dr. Meredith Bergman, who was a lecturer in trade union politics at the time. I attended only one of her lectures before swiftly changing courses. Pretty hard line, I've got to tell you. My siblings and I grew up in a family community that was proudly independent, one where we helped each other out, where we lent a hand to the neighbours and worked together to improve our lives. Whether that was supporting mum and dad to work long hours and 2 jobs and finance our first home, or going to the school on weekends to build playgrounds and gardens or mow the playing fields. Government to us was remote and frankly largely unwelcome in our lives. We took the opportunities that came along and made something of it, both as individuals and as a community. But Mr. President, somewhere along the way, I fear areas of our society have lost track of those values. And this was recently illustrated in the controversial SBS documentary Struggle Street, where we saw generational welfare dependency and a loss of hope and meaning, leading to tragic self-abuse in the communities betrayed. We can't turn a blind eye to this. The challenge is for our Parliament. Now, His Excellency the Governor, on behalf of the government, made the observation in his speech, I quote, "While strong economic growth is the hallmark of a successful state, our economic might is meaningless unless it is used to support the most vulnerable, protect the environment and provide opportunities to all our citizens." He also said, "Old problems need new solutions." Honourable members, I strongly endorse those sentiments. And the challenge for us in 2015 is to break the entrenched cycle of poverty and abuse within large sections of our disadvantaged communities, to restore hope and rekindle that spirit of families and communities helping themselves to make their lives better for themselves and their children's future. Now, we can't address this challenge alone. It requires partnership with the federal government, who I believe are on the right track with the difficult but essential welfare reforms. And it's not just about welfare reform, it's also about the infrastructure these communities have. The housing, the streets, the parks, the amenities, the schools, and the services of the area. The obsolete and run-down public housing estates of largely Western Sydney and parts of the inner city is a major contributor to this social disease. Now, this is not unique to Sydney. We've seen the same challenges of dealing with these failed policies in the UK and the United States. Governments of all persuasions have identified this problem in recent years. We need to continue with vigour the redevelopment of these estates by companies motivated both by profit and those for the not-for-profit sector specialising in community housing projects. We need to really seriously incentivise more public-private partnerships in this area for renewal, as was proposed in the now seemingly shelved Redfern-Waterloo Master Plan. But money alone cannot fix this problem. I'm not a strongly religious man. I was brought up fairly low church Anglican, and in more recent times, through my partner Jesper Hansen and his Danish family, I've become more appreciative of the progressive wing of the Danish Lutheran Church. But I've also worked constructively over the years with Hillsong and the Salvation Army as an elected local councillor. I witnessed their largely unheralded work in the poorer areas of our city. And whilst never an advocate of state-sponsored religion and a strong proponent of a clear separation between state and church, there is no doubt in my mind that partnering with institutions such as these to reach out to isolated and dysfunctional communities, as I have outlined, can have a benefit in turning their lives around. Now, as a state schoolboy, you'll find no stronger advocate of a well-resourced state school system. Hear, hear. I strongly support the reforms to decentralise the management of our school resources and employment of good teachers introduced by the O'Farrell and the Baird governments. Bringing local communities back into the schools to manage them and take ownership will only strengthen those communities and the outcomes we are looking for. Building modern communities is not only about housing and changing social attitudes, it's about creating opportunity. That is why I'm very proud to be part of the Mike Baird government. The recent election was fought on a plan of unprecedented and historic scale to build infrastructure across the state that will reinforce our economy for a generation to come. And whilst I know, Mr. President, a first speech should skirt political controversy, I will say in brief passing that as I door-knocked sways of Liverpool, Casula, Chipping Norton and Lanier during the election campaign with my good friend Melanie Gibbons, who's here in the gallery, the new member for Halsworthy, and I congratulate you on your election and your team for an outstanding result in what was Labor's heartland of southwest and western Sydney. People we met quickly tired of and saw through Labor and the union's scare campaign on the proposed leasing of 49% of poles and wires. They understood the role of modern government is no longer to own and run assets like power poles or the buses or indeed the airports and the ports. More importantly, they understood that Mike Baird's infrastructure investment plan was going to support the creation of real jobs, long-term, well-paid jobs for their kids and their grandchildren in Western Sydney. Now, Mr. President, I was born in Penrith and had grandparents at Badgerys Creek. In fact, that small family farm and family graves are now in the centre of the Federal Airport's second airport site. It was from Badgerys Creek that my 19-year-old great-uncle Frank Farrer set off via steam train from Liverpool Station in October 1917 to enlist in the Great War. only to fall, like so many others, in Péronne, France, only 11 months later. Military service has touched my family, with my late grandfather Bruce Peterson also having served in Papua New Guinea in the Second World War, and my sister Michelle and her son Michael Larson having served in the army in recent times. I pay tribute at this time of Anzac commemorations and noting, Mr. President, the moving tributes you are making in this House to those who have and continue to serve our nation. Particularly, I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to my staff member here in Parliament, Michael Baker, who's in the gallery, and his family, who on Monday farewelled their 102-year-old Poppy, Keith Baker, a decorated veteran of the Second World War. It was indeed a special memory for Michael to be with his grandfather in the Anzac Day parade only a few weeks earlier. And the connection of this place to war and sacrifice continues today, Mr. President, lest we forget. Mr. President, it was somewhat of a homecoming when Mayor Ned Manoon, acknowledged in the gallery today, rang me to ask if I could give him a hand at Liverpool Council. A 3-month project became 2 years as I worked with our Liberal Party's talented 32-year-old then, popularly elected mayor and his team at the council. With nearly a lifetime largely in or around politics and public policy, you'd be forgiving to thinking that I might know most about it. But there is always more to learn, I found out. And at Liverpool, working on the second airport project, a project wholly within Liverpool local government area, and estimated to create 60,000 jobs over the next generation, I was reacquainted with the aspirations and changing nature of the people of Western and southwestern Sydney. Liverpool is our state's, if not the nation's, leading example of multicultural harmony. No one cultural group dominates, and each, whether the diverse Middle Eastern communities, the Indian or Fijian communities, the Tongans, the Serbians, the Croatians, the Italians, or more traditionally the Anglo-Saxon communities, they all celebrate their unique cultural identity, but without hesitation come together as Australians to celebrate our nation as their home. And it was here, more than the city of Sydney, where I really appreciated a role for local government in supporting cultural events and building community harmony. All this led by a mayor and a council who understand and strongly identify with the aspirations of people of Western Sydney. So to the Liberal councillors Tonia Chidi, President of Wesrock, Mazar Hadid, Sabrina Mamone, Peter Ostiski and Gus Balut, I say thank you for the experience and I acknowledge the work you do on behalf of the community and the Liberal Party in southwestern Sydney. To Liberal Mayor Ned Manoon, an inspiring young leader, a modern Australian Muslim leader, I say thank you for the lessons you taught an old hand like me. And my departing advice to you, Mr. Mayor, is that you have a great future and indeed you are needed in Parliament, whether that be in here or in Canberra in the not too distant future. Liverpool and the region has a firm friend in me, and I will do whatever is possible to assist in helping the region reach its great potential. And Mr. President, none of us are here without supporters to make it possible, and none so for me than you yourself, Mr. President. We've travelled parallel journeys in life and in politics, and it's a tremendous honour to be in this House serving with you as the President. Now, I apologise in advance if I missed someone. These Hollywood roll calls are always very dangerous. But first of all, I must thank the Young Liberal movement. I first joined the Young Liberals in the late 1980s. We had a slogan back then, vision today, leadership tomorrow, an ideal we strive for, and I have no doubt we have delivered. I became lifelong friends and colleagues of party leaders like yourself, Mr. President, Senator Maurice Payne, Federal Treasurer Joe Hockey, State Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian, who's in the gallery, welcome, Transport Minister Andrew Constance, and welcome, and the Honourable Catherine Cusack, and the former opposition leader John Brogden. And friends like colleagues Minister John Ajaka, Mark Coolray MP, Gareth Ward MP, Minister Stuart Ayres, welcome to the gallery, Bruce Notley-Smith MP, the Honourable Greg Pearce, my colleague here, Matt Keane MP, and Minister Gabriel Upton. And I acknowledge my newly elected colleague, the Honourable Scott Farlow, have joined me along the way and been instrumental in my arriving here today. I'd like to thank the current Young Liberal leaders, including President James Wallace and his team, for their support in assisting me to this position. I'm not sure what the current slogan is for the Young Liberals, but you can't do wrong by recycling that old one. There are others to thank as well, friends and party leaders like Liberal Party Vice President Trent Zimmerman, whose time to serve in Parliament will not come soon enough. And how can I not sincerely thank a mentor to so many and a dear, dear friend, the former Minister Michael Photius, who may not be here. Friends, he'll pay for that. Friends, and friends and mentors like Chris McDivan and Catherine Greiner need special mention for their role in helping me in my career. Other friends like Chris Muir, Scott Jeffries, Councillor Peter Kavanagh, Jason Collins, Josephine Brodsky. You have to mention your branch president, Michael Tice, your branch treasurer, Scott Quine, Matt and Brooke Daniel, Keith Werry and Murray Harlan, all deserve acknowledgement among many, many others. And local government is close to my heart, and I chair the Liberal Party's management committee in this area. And I acknowledge nearly 200 endorsed Liberal Party councillors across New South Wales for their service to the party, the community, and their assistance, sometimes not always welcome, to me over the years. I particularly acknowledge Mayor Sally Betts, Mayor Ted Sang, Councillor Scott Nash, Councillor Christine Forster and Councillor Edward Mandler for their support and commitment to the party, the community and myself over the time. I owe a huge debt to the Liberal Party for the opportunities I've been given. I thank the party pre-selectors, many of whom are here today, and the State Executive led by our President Chris Downey for their trust. So I will not let you down. The Liberal Party, founded by Menzies, traced back to Alfred Deakin, is my natural philosophical home. In my view, there must be a natural wrestle of ideas, ideals and philosophy in any functioning political organisation. But I'm reminded of Sir Robert Menzies' words as to why I joined this great party. And he said, it's our mantra, we took the name Liberal because we were determined to be a progressive party, willing to make experiments, in no sense reactionary, but believing in the individual, in his or her rights and enterprises. Mr. President, can I now briefly turn to my family? I think honourable members have already had a taste of my family and the family I'm from. To my parents, Max and Margaret, thank you for instilling in me and my brothers and sisters the values of enterprise, personal worth, acceptance of diversity and love of family. You taught all your children, I think it's the most important lesson you taught all your children from the earliest age never to judge other people for their differences. To my brother Danny, who's sitting in the gallery too, thank you for not only being the sometimes suffering younger brother, as is a role of younger brothers, but also being a dear friend to me. And I thank my sisters Michelle and Colleen and nephews Michael, Curtis, Nicholas, Alexi and Lucas, as well as my only niece, Ashley, for all their love, pride and support. Now to my partner of 14 years, Jesper Høberg Mallard Hansen of Denmark, and I'll provide that spelling to the Hansard. How much the world has moved forward since we first met. I would say marriage never featured in our plans. Our relationship, our love was private, one shared only with family and friends. But that changed when the Danish Parliament took the step to move from same-sex civil union partnerships to a non-discriminatory marriage act. The timing seemed right to marry, and in 2013, in a wonderful, embracing, non-judgmental Lutheran church in Copenhagen, before so many friends and family, we were married, many here today, including you, Mr. President. To have friends and family bear witness to our commitment and share our love is something only those who have been married can really appreciate. To have the state and the church accept our relationship without prejudice, only those who have experienced discrimination can really understand. Our marriage recognised in most of the Western world, from New Zealand, South Africa, the United Kingdom, most of Western Europe, and in one way or the other to be determined in the United States Supreme Court later this year, is still not recognised in Australia. So I take this moment whilst thanking you, Jasper, from the bottom of my heart and in a million ways for all that you've done to support me over the years, as you say, to stop me crawling up the walls, by joining the party voices, calling on our Prime Minister and my federal colleagues to allow a full and free conscience vote for all members on marriage equality when the time arrives. For Jasper's Danish family, Mother Tuva and Father Pulbent Hansen, I'd like to say thank you for letting Australia have your son. Our country is a better place for his devotion, strength and enterprise, not to mention his amazing chef skills. Many members here can attest. I was going to say that in Danish, but I gave up. As I mentioned earlier, Mr President, I worked here at the Legislative Council in the 1990s for President Max Willis and quickly came to appreciate the important role the upper house plays in the good government of our state. As my long-time friend and mentor, Chris Public, who's here today, said in his maiden speech in the Senate, dare I say the date, Chris, 1978, and he's talking about the Senate, that applies to the upper house here. It has ensured that executive government remained responsible to the wishes of the people. And those words are as applicable to the Legislative Council today as they were to the Senate all those years ago. I worked here for giants of my party, Ted Pickering, Virginia Chadwick, John Hannaford, with supporting roles from people like Marlene Goldsmith, Brian Pizzuti, Patricia Forsyth and John Ryan, who's here today. They strode this chamber with purpose to successfully deliver good government for the people of New South Wales on behalf of the Griner Fay governments, and they did that successfully. Mr President, I only pray that we, as their successors in this chamber, can live up to the ideals and the achievements of those good men and women who went before us. Thank you. Thank you very much. David, I thought you might have walked out. I was hoping you would. Hey.
And now you get to heckle freely. Don't worry about me.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Congratulations, mate. I'll talk to you one day about
President,
The Honourable Greg Pearce.
I move that this debate be adjourned to the next sitting day.
The question is that this debate be adjourned until the next sitting day. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, thank you. And thank you. And also, thank you.